The soldiers form their battle lines. Suddenly, one of them hears a noise behind him. Before he can react, an outsider swiftly cuts down the monster approaching from behind. The soldier is stunned. The outsider just saved his life. Ashamed, the soldier apologizes for how harshly he's treated the outsider in the past. He thanks him for saving his life and protecting his tribe, vowing never to forget the debt he owes. The outsider has now earned the trust of the elves and is free to move within their territory. Meanwhile, the soldier's younger sister insists on rewarding him. To everyone's shock, she offers herself as the reward, asking to marry him. The elven citizens cheer wildly for the newlyweds. They exchange vows, and the outsider becomes the first human ever to marry an elf woman. Then a man's voice cuts through the cheers. "That's enough," he shouts. The lights flicker back on. He turns to the crowd and declares, "Ares is not just a simple game. Every character in Ares is powered by AI, each with their own personality, judgment, and will. Ares is another world." The crowd is speechless. Everything they just witnessed looked too real. Ares isn't just a hyper-realistic game. It's a living world. The god of Ares judges users directly. Depending on their achievements, players can gain immense power, become legendary heroes, or even establish their own factions and reign as kings. In other words, anything possible in reality can be achieved in Ares, and even the impossible can be realized. The crowd erupts in excitement. Everyone wants to buy the game. Created by the genius developer Lee Se-jin, Ares didn't just revolutionize the gaming industry. It changed global culture overnight, reaching over 1 billion users in the blink of an eye. 1 year later, Ares Beginner Zone. 2 new players stand at the entrance, thrilled to finally start their journey. An event is underway. Break a wooden doll within 10 strikes. Millions have tried, all failed. The reward? A new game capsule worth millions of won and a +5 bonus to all stats. One player insists 10 strikes are plenty to break it. The other laughs, reminding him that even professional athletes and gold medalists couldn't do it. It seems impossible. Then why is there such a big crowd? The first asks. Because today, the second replies, someone special is going to try, the strongest player in Ares, Matasik. The atmosphere explodes with excitement. Matasik, a mountain of muscle, steps forward. Rumor has it he once killed a bear with his bare hands. Compared to him, the wooden doll looks tiny. Matasik tightens his grip and unleashes his strike. The wooden doll is blasted backward, and the crowd holds its breath. Could this be the first success? Developers in the control room watch anxiously. They need this win. Too many complaints have piled up already. If he fails, one mutters, players will say we made an impossible quest for publicity. Tomorrow's headlines will destroy us. The system window flashes. Quest failed. Try again later. Matasik's face falls in disbelief. The developers sigh in defeat and decide to leave early before the complaint calls start flooding in. Just as they're walking out, a voice calls from across the room. Wait! Someone else stepped up to take the challenge. The head developer waves dismissively. Forget it. Look at him, he's still wearing the default starter outfit. He probably hasn't even hunted 10 monsters yet. On the screen, the new challenger grips his weapon confidently. He unwraps it, exhales slowly, and strikes. With a single slash, the wooden doll splits cleanly in two. A world notification appears across every player's interface. Congratulations to the first player to destroy the wooden doll. All stats +5. The developers freeze. What? That's impossible. Matasik was the strongest player in Ares. Whoever did this must be a complete unknown. Then the head developer narrows his eyes. Run a grade check on his weapon. A few moments later, a woman at the next desk gasps. Sir, this can't be right. His sword is registering as epic grade, and the stats are unbelievable. The room falls silent. The head developer leans closer to the screen. Who is this guy? He mutters. Find out his real identity now. There's a clang of metal rings along with a blazing fire. The protagonist calls out to his father. Once, then again. He approaches his father, tears streaming down his face. His father has returned. The protagonist hugs him tightly and promises that he'll protect him. His father interrupts, saying he's still hot. Extremely hot. The protagonist shouts for his father to get out of the flames. Suddenly, the protagonist wakes up crying, realizing it was the same nightmare again. The scene shifts to a hospital lobby. A man laughs while watching footage on his tablet. No one has ever beaten the wooden doll, and he knows brute strength alone won't work. The protagonist greets his friend, Kim Ji-hun. Ji-hun teases him for finally showing up at the hospital, saying it's the only way to meet since the protagonist works non-stop and ignores his calls. The protagonist asks what Ji-hun wants. Ji-hun asks if he isn't hot wearing all those clothes. The protagonist lowers his mask and threatens to kill his friend. Ji-hun apologizes, then gets to the point. He asks if the protagonist has heard of the game Ares. The protagonist hasn't. Ji-hun explains that it's the hottest AI-driven game right now, and there's a beginner event where challengers must break a wooden doll. So far, no one has succeeded. Even celebrities and athletes have failed. But if the protagonist can do it, he'll win a VIP game capsule worth millions of won. Ji-hun insists they give it a try. It's difficult but not impossible. When it comes to breaking the wooden dummy, the protagonist might actually stand a chance. Later, at the protagonist's apartment, Ji-hun reveals that he spent 10 million won on a standard capsule to play Ares. The sync rate is around 85%, which should be fine for playing. The protagonist is shocked by the cost, but Ji-hun insists it's worth it. If things go well, the rewards can be traded for real-life currency. Ji-hun urges him to get inside the capsule and try it. The protagonist asks where Ji-hun got it, but Ji-hun dismisses the question. What matters is how much money they can make. The protagonist doubts they'll actually profit and asks what Ji-hun's plan is. Ji-hun admits he doesn't have one. It's an investment. He believes the protagonist could do really well in Ares. The protagonist asks, based on what? Ji-hun explains that Ares has a blacksmith class, and the protagonist is the son of a world-renowned master craftsman, the sole successor. With his real-life experience, he could easily beat the wooden doll. The protagonist finally understands Ji-hun's plan. He removes his hat and explains that he's never shown anyone his full face since the accident. This is who I am now, he says. I'm not in any state to try something like that. He flashes back to the past. His home engulfed in flames, his father trapped under rubble. The protagonist rushes to save him, pulling him to safety while crying because his father is unresponsive. The incident destroyed everything. His father never regained consciousness, and hospital bills began piling up faster than he could pay. Now, the protagonist works construction. He used to forge metal with his father for 10 years, but ever since the accident, whenever he tries to use a hammer, it slips from his weakened right hand. Blacksmithing is impossible for him now, and even manual labor is a struggle. The protagonist thanks Ji-hun for trying to help, but says he can handle his problems alone. He tells Ji-hun to return the capsule and not waste 10 million won. As he prepares to leave for his part-time job, Ji-hun calls him an idiot. He knows the protagonist is barely scraping by to pay for his father's hospital bills. But this lifestyle isn't sustainable. Ji-hun insists that the capsule could change everything. He urges the protagonist not to give up on treatment because of money. The person I know isn't like that, Ji-hun says. He reminds him of his dream, to live his life as a blacksmith, and that he could do it again in Ares. Ji-hun tells him he doesn't care about the money. He believes in him. He begs the protagonist to give the game one try. After that, he promises he won't push him anymore. The protagonist listens, thinking of his father. His hand starts to tremble. Later that day at work, the protagonist shakes his head, calling Ji-hun's words foolish. He needs to focus on reality, on earning money for his father's treatment. But when he hears the clang of metal beside him, the sound echoes deep within his heart. That night, he decides to try the capsule. His love for forging leads him there. Remembering Ji-hun's words, he steps inside, ready to see what makes Ares so special. The system greets him. Welcome to the world of Ares. Beginning character creation. He sets his nickname as Hyansu. During customization, he's shocked. The game removes all his scars. He looks like his old self again. When he lifts his right arm, he realizes he's regained strength. More than ever before. The protagonist smiles, silently thanking Ji-hun. He vows to work hard in the game to repay him. Moments later, he's summoned to a place called Barden Territory, inside Len's blacksmith. A blacksmith is hard at work forging a sword, determined to create his finest blade. The protagonist watches for a moment, then calmly says, "That's not the correct way to make a proper sword." The blacksmith freezes and looks behind him. A stranger stands in his workshop. The protagonist tells the blacksmith that it looks like he's forging a blade, but he'll never make a strong sword like that. The blacksmith is curious to learn what an outsider knows about sword forging. The protagonist explains that he knows it's not his place to interfere, but he genuinely wants to help him forge a great sword. He couldn't just stand there and watch him make mistakes. The blacksmith tells the protagonist that he talks as if he actually knows what he's doing. Thinking he has nothing to lose, the blacksmith challenges the protagonist to show him how it's done. He wants to see if the protagonist really has the skills to back up his words and decides to watch closely. The protagonist's original plan was to get on the blacksmith's good side and ask to use the forge, but this might work in his favor. He agrees to make a sword, but under one condition. The blacksmith asks what the condition is. The protagonist replies that if he can prove his skills, he gets to keep the sword he forges, and in return, he'll show the blacksmith something worthwhile. The blacksmith thinks the protagonist is cocky but agrees, warning that if he fails, he'll have to pay a price for his arrogance. The protagonist accepts without hesitation. It's been 3 years since the protagonist last forged a sword, and he isn't sure if he still has the touch. But as he begins hammering, the old feeling returns. Memories flood back, the rhythm, the heat, the spark of creation. He feels alive again. The protagonist is determined to create the best sword he's ever made. He's shocked by how realistic the game feels. He smiles and says, "It feels good to be back." His body still remembers everything his father taught him. He believes he can do this. The blacksmith watches closely, thinking to himself that the protagonist does know a thing or two. Still, he's certain the protagonist has reached his limit. Yet as the night goes on, the blacksmith grows more and more astonished. The protagonist is still smiling, still working, still pushing forward. The blacksmith thinks results are all that matter here, and unless the protagonist has some hidden skill, he'll eventually hit a wall. He had only agreed to let the protagonist forge because he thought he'd get something out of it. After all, there's no way a player in the starter zone could have a blacksmithing skill. Then suddenly, the blacksmith sees something unexpected. The protagonist bends the heated sword, folding it on top of itself. He repeats the process, folding, reheating, tempering again and again. The blacksmith realizes that this could strengthen the steel and remove impurities. He wonders how he never thought of such a simple yet brilliant technique. Curious, he uses his skill to appraise the sword. The steel's grade has risen from D to C. The blacksmith can't believe his eyes. He's forged C-grade steel before, but never this fast. Now he's certain the protagonist wasn't bluffing, but surely this is his limit. A few clever tricks won't change the fact that without a skill, he's just an ordinary craftsman. The next morning, the blacksmith wakes up and is shocked to see the protagonist still at the forge. He hasn't stopped. He's been working all night, still smiling as he hammers away. The blacksmith asks if he ever gets tired. The protagonist doesn't answer. He simply pulls the blade from the fire. The steel now glows with a B-grade shine. The blacksmith is speechless. A B-grade sword, created without a single skill? Impossible. Yet the protagonist isn't done. He's aiming even higher. He studies the steel, touches the edge of the blade, but begins to feel dizzy from exhaustion. The blacksmith quickly takes the sword and tells him to rest, offering to help. The protagonist smiles and thanks him. Together, they continue the work. The blacksmith takes careful notes, amazed by the protagonist's technique. When they finish, he can hardly believe the results. The steel is now A-grade, capable of being forged into a rare-grade weapon. He admits he's never seen anything like it. Using his appraisal skill, he confirms that this is beyond anything possible in the starter village. The blacksmith tells the protagonist that with this steel, they could create a one-of-a-kind sword. "Aren't you excited?" he asks. The protagonist shakes his head slightly. "It's too early to celebrate," he says. The blacksmith doesn't understand. The protagonist explains, "The hilt still needs to be crafted, the blade honed to a finer edge, and the balance adjusted to withstand immense force. The edge is still far from perfect." The blacksmith is left speechless, then bursts into laughter. "I've never met an outsider like you," he says. The protagonist smiles. "I've always loved forging, even as a kid." The blacksmith grabs 2 glowing rocks and hands them over. The protagonist looks puzzled. The blacksmith explains, "This is mithril, or an heirloom passed down in my family for generations." The protagonist stares at the shimmering stones, stunned. "Why are you giving these to me?" The blacksmith replies, "Because I've learned so much from you. It made me want to learn even more. Besides, this ore is far beyond my skill to work with. I want to see what kind of sword you'll create." The protagonist hesitates but can't hide his excitement. Mithril, something that doesn't exist in this world. A legendary metal from myths. He knows it's a gamble, but there's no way he can refuse. A month later, the protagonist finishes forging the mithril sword and tests it on the wooden training dummy. It slices clean through. Elsewhere, the game's developers watch in disbelief. From the moment the protagonist logged into Ares, he went straight to a forge, obtained mithril, made a sword, and cleared the wooden dummy event. Something no one had ever done. The lead developer is impressed. Another developer, a woman, reports that the protagonist lives in a small studio apartment and logged in from an acquaintance's home. The lead developer raises an eyebrow as she reads his application for a VIP capsule. The protagonist had requested that his real-world identity remain private. The lead developer is shocked by how firm his terms were. If the public learned that he was the only player to beat the wooden dummy, he'd become a celebrity overnight. He must have his reasons for staying hidden. "Where is he now?" the lead developer asks. The woman checks her monitor. "He just entered the hunting training center." At the center, the instructor frowns. "You shouldn't be here," he says. "You're only level 1. You don't stand a chance." He waves dismissively. "Don't waste my time. Get lost." The protagonist frowns but stays calm. The instructor can't see his true stats. "I'm not here to waste your time," he says. "You're a pain," the instructor mutters. "Fine. Grab a sword for the test." The protagonist smirks. "If any sword will do. Is it all right if I use my own?" The protagonist spent an entire month in the beginner zone, a place normally cleared in just 30 minutes by other players. Thanks to that, his stats are now off the charts. More than anything, he holds the only epic grade sword that anyone can obtain in the game. Yet, he's still classless and stuck at level 1. The team leader of the game developers has managed countless artisans and professionals over the years, but even compared to them, what's happening now is absurd. The team leader wonders if they should really leave everything to the god of the Ares world without stepping in. Should they truly trust everything to the super AI? The head developer, a woman, is also worried about what might happen in the game. However, the team leader smiles, knowing the protagonist has no idea what's waiting for him. The instructor gives the protagonist a harsh look because he wants to use his own hand-forged sword. The instructor wonders if the protagonist actually thinks he's a blacksmith. He gives an ominous smile. He doesn't believe for a second that the protagonist can pass the test. The instructor looks at the protagonist and says, "This place is swarming with monsters on 3 sides. One trained swordsman is worth more than any shoddy weapon." He doesn't understand why someone chasing a profession like blacksmithing would come to the training ground. System window. Affinity with Instructor Relson has decreased by -10. The protagonist reflects, thinking he's seen this reaction plenty of times in real life too. Being a blacksmith was always seen as a useless dream, he tells himself. But in this game, it feels like his efforts could finally be recognized. With a stern expression, the protagonist asks the instructor, "Of all the swordsmen who've passed through this training ground, who was the most outstanding?" Then he declares, I want to take a test harder than anyone ever has. The instructor is enraged by the request. He's trained countless students and knows talent when he sees it. But the protagonist's arrogance provokes him. System window. Instructor Relson has been provoked. The instructor smirks and says he'll start the trial. He tells the protagonist to follow him. His role is to teach newcomers the basics and run confirmation tests, but he also grants a special trial to those rare few who show true promise. The highest record ever achieved in the training ground is the Stage 3 trial. The protagonist's opponent will be a level 6 swift goblin. The instructor warns him, if you insist on such a reckless challenge, the punishment will match. If you fail, you can't return here for a week. The protagonist asks, is Stage 3 the final trial? When the instructor says no, he calmly replies, then I'd like to take all the trials, up to the final stage. The instructor is furious, believing the protagonist is dismissing his training. Fine, he snaps. Let's see you attempt the trials. The instructor then uncages the final Stage 4 trial monster, the Mad Goblin, level 15. He says, no one in the entire world has cleared Stage 3 or 4. Not a single soul. The goblins rush to attack the protagonist. He stands his ground. One goblin leaps toward him, and the protagonist instantly slices off its head. There's no weapon in the game that can surpass the sword he forged himself. Another swift goblin slashes his stomach. The instructor mutters, that's a critical hit. That's why the swift goblins are called the beginner's nightmare. But then he's shocked. The protagonist is still standing. Though injured, his HP is at 82%. A level 1 player just survived a critical hit. His stats improved from all the time he spent forging weapons, especially his strength and vitality. The instructor warns, it's not over yet. The real danger starts now. The Mad Goblin charges, activating its special ability, Madness Thorns. The protagonist is struck. System window. Status effect applied. Dizziness and partial vision loss. Barely able to open his eyes, the protagonist steadies himself. The instructor admits the kid is impressive, but believes this is the end. Both goblins attack at once. The protagonist focuses, trusting the weapon he crafted with his own hands. He strikes, cutting one goblin cleanly in half, then pivots and slays the other in a single motion. The entire developer team, along with the instructor, are speechless. The protagonist has defeated all the monsters, completing the trial. The instructor is at a loss for words. Your strikes were rough, he admits, but every swing drew out the blade's true power. You must have trained in swordsmanship before. The protagonist smiles. A blacksmith must know how to wield the weapons they create. The instructor notices the muscles and scars on his arms and lowers his head. Can you forgive me for my rude behavior? He asks. System window. Affinity with Relson has reached maximum. The instructor now respects him deeply and offers a proposal. Have you ever considered becoming a Mad Lord? System window. Legendary class quest available. Class change. Mad Lord. The developers are stunned. To be offered a legendary class change to Mad Lord, a rank even above the epic Mad Knight, marks the protagonist as a Class 2 special management user. The head developer realizes that if the protagonist accepts, there's no turning back. The instructor explains, a Mad Lord commands hundreds of Mad Knights and stands as a guardian of the world. What do you say? Will you use your talent to rise as a king among knights? The protagonist smiles. I appreciate the offer, but I must decline. A blacksmith is not a knight. The developers are amazed by his answer. The instructor grins. Magnificent, he says. The protagonist once thought he'd never hold a hammer again. But in this game he felt it. His life as a blacksmith begins anew. System window. Hidden quest unlocked. Meet Lord Vance. The instructor hands him a letter of recommendation to the Lord's castle, where someone awaits an extraordinary blacksmith like him. He also gives the protagonist armor once worn by a Mad Lord. Prove yourself, the instructor says. Do what no one else could. I believe in you. The protagonist nods. Thank you. I'll give it my all. The developers agree that the protagonist has overcome his greatest trial, and is now on the path to becoming the god of blacksmiths. The training ground has now been cleared, and the protagonist is about to enter the territory village. The main quest has been received, marking the end of the tutorial. The protagonist logs out of the game. He still needs to pay the gas bill and take care of several things in the real world. Looking at his phone, he remembers he must secure his father's hospital fees and cover their living expenses. Ji-hun calls the protagonist. He answers the phone, and Ji-hun asks if he cleared the training grounds, explaining that he's been too busy with work to log in. The protagonist replies that he did and that he just accepted a new quest and arrived at the territory village. Ji-hun tells him that he can now access the auction house. Equipment and items essential to the game are crafted and sold there. 10 gold equals 10,000 won, and with real cash trades being so active, many players actually treat it as a profession. This is the real reason Ji-hun wanted the protagonist to play Ares. Ji-hun praises the protagonist's forging abilities, saying that the sword he created is the best in the game. Once the protagonist gets a VIP capsule with 99% synchronization, it'll be even more incredible. With his blacksmith mastery, he could flood the Ares world with legendary weapons. The protagonist smiles and thanks Ji-hun. He warms up his food, feeling that his path is now clear. He decides to focus on crafting and completing quests to earn gold. To do that, he'll need to manage his stamina, because even gaming drains a lot of energy. He's determined to make enough money to ensure his father receives the best treatment possible and eventually wakes up again. The protagonist logs back into the game and enters the auction house. A system window appears, asking him to enter a shop name to list his items. He names it Hyun's Blacksmith. Looking around, he wonders where he is, but soon the message appears. Shop tool, Hyun's Blacksmith, has been created. From now on, the protagonist can use the auction board anytime, anywhere. He wonders what he should list first. He decides to post the first sword he ever forged in the game. Similar swords are selling for 70 gold, so he lists his for 100 gold. While waiting for results, he plans to explore the village systems. Soon, the auction house notifies other players of his sword. Players notice that it was crafted without a class, which shocks many of them. The bid price begins to climb rapidly. The Golden Shield Guild takes an interest in the sword. Players go wild, amazed that the protagonist crafted such a fine weapon out of crude materials. On top of that, the sword even has enhancement options. It's so well made that it can be used up to level 50. The protagonist names the weapon the first sword, symbolizing the beginning of his collection. It holds extra value because it was made by a level 1 player. Whoever buys the first sword will be recognized as the first to own one of his creations. The protagonist blushes slightly, thinking it's a bit embarrassing. It's been ages since he last forged a weapon, and he's still adjusting to the game. Suddenly, a system alert appears. His sword has been sold. Confused by how fast it happened, he opens the auction book to check the details. The sword sold for 1,008 gold coins. The protagonist is stunned. That's over 1 million won. He smiles in disbelief, realizing how insane this game is. The buyer's name appears, Blam, from the Golden Shield Guild. Blam sends a direct message, saying the guild is honored to be the first to buy one of the protagonist's artifacts. They extend an offer for him to join their guild, noting that they're always looking for exceptional individuals. Alternatively, they propose an exclusive sales contract or guild membership. The protagonist checks the Golden Shield Guild's profile and is shocked. It's a blacksmith guild with over 780,000 followers. Ji-hun once told him that gaining followers is much harder than leveling up. Having that many means countless players are paying attention, and attention leads directly to profit. Currently, the protagonist only has 82 followers. However, when he opens his message box, countless recruitment offers from different guilds start flooding in. The protagonist decides it's still too early to join any guild. His artisan skills are his greatest strength, and their value shines brighter when he stands on his own. The amount of money he can make is limitless. He hasn't even revealed half of his true potential. His real journey begins now at the Lord's Castle. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. The more support you show, the faster I can post the next chapters. So stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next.